The hardest part with ROI is making it applicable to you. Every single company is different. You all have different goals. You all have different metrics that you need to follow. And so it's really important that you can take these frameworks, but you have to be able to apply it to your own business. You have to be able to apply it to your own goals. So please help me give a big, huge welcome to Jenna Meister from Airbnb.
Hello. Hello, community champions. It is so exciting to be here in a room full of people who understand what I'm talking about. And I'm so inspired by all of you who are continuing to lead the community charge for your companies. As David said, I'm Jenna Meister, and I lead community at Airbnb. I have been at Airbnb for the last 4.5 years. And somebody recently told me that I have a bachelor's degree in Airbnb now, which feels about right. I came on in mid-2011, right when we were about to launch our international expansion. And I started recruiting and training and hiring and managing our international community teams. And so I've worked with our teams in Europe, North America, Latin America, Asia, and Australia. And more recently, I've been leading our global community operations. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how Airbnb thinks about community, how we've integrated it into our business in ways that are both qualitative and quantitative. And then I'm going to walk you through a basic framework, as David discussed, that hopefully you can start applying to think about your community measurement. And then I'll end by giving you a glimpse into a system that we've developed over the last year, which is pretty extensive, and it does require analytics resources. And I know how hard those are to get, just like you do. But I want to give you kind of this glimpse to kind of enable you to think about future possibilities. So the vision of Airbnb is to create a world where all 7 billion of us can belong anywhere. And the mission of the community team is to build an engaged, active, thriving community so that we can harness the power of that engagement to help drive outcomes that are beneficial to the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is made up of the company, our community of hosts and guests, and our local communities. Engagement is defined as the psychological connection between a community member and your brand and how likely they are to positively contribute back to that ecosystem. And when I talk about value to the ecosystem, I'm not necessarily talking about revenue. There are so many different ways that our community members can help one another in addition to helping the company. So our team, we have a global team of 15 community managers around the world, and every day they are on the front lines interacting with our hosts and guests, building relationships, putting a face to the brand, representing and embodying our core values, listening to feedback, sharing stories, building relationships with our top members, and creating opportunities for people to come together and connect. My job is to represent the voice of all of these community members and community managers back to the company to empower Airbnb to make more community-centric decisions. And so I'm in very close contact with all of our community managers. They relay feedback to me every day so that I can represent it at HQ. And I also help guide our different community strategies for new programs or campaigns or launches, whether it's an online platform or our rebrand that we launched last year, or venturing into new markets like Cuba and thinking about how to build our host community in Cuba. So our job as the community team is to be the bridge between our community and the company. But how does community add value to the business? So let's start with the why. Why do people join a community? The reason people join a community is because together we can achieve more than we could alone. And so when you think about infusing community into everything you do, an engaged community can be a multiplier to the success of all your initiatives. So it enables you to do more with less and for what you do to be more authentic because your community members are the ones driving it, and they're the ones providing social proof. Everybody's always talking about how you scale. The way that you scale is by collaborating with your community to help you achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. If you take events, meetups, for example. So our community comes online and they use the Airbnb product so that they can meet up offline in the real world. So we know that we attract the kind of people who value human interaction in real life. And so what we try to do is hold as many events as possible to enable these interactions. But we have hosts in 34,000 cities, and we're not going to hire a community team of 34,000 community managers. So what we do is empower our hosts to organize meetups themselves, to connect online and offline, and our community managers are the ones that empower that. So that enables us to scale. It's more authentic because it's driven by the host, and ultimately it's more beneficial for the whole ecosystem. So everybody wants to know how to put a dollar figure on engagement. And Gallup has done some really interesting research on customer engagement that I encourage you all to read, and I'm going to walk you through a few of those statistics. So they use a methodology, which is a survey-based methodology, and it basically buckets customers or users into 3 categories: actively engaged or fully engaged, indifferent, and actively disengaged. And what they have found that across industries as diverse as banking, retail, travel, hospitality, e-commerce, fully engaged customers represent a 23% premium in terms of share of wallet, profitability, revenue, and relationship growth. And actively disengaged customers represent a 13% discount in the same measures. Does anybody here manage a B2B community? That's a lot of people. So this stat is for you. So companies that successfully engage their B2B communities realize 63% less churn, 55% higher share of wallet, and 50% higher productivity. Electronic shoppers who are fully engaged spend 29% more per shopping trip than those who are disengaged. Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce marketplace, so they had the biggest IPO in history, and in their SEC filings, when talking about their competitive advantage, they said that the network effects of their marketplace increase loyalty and frequency of use and make it hard to replicate the ecosystem, which protects their leadership position in the market and strengthens their competitive advantage. So what does this mean for you? How do you create a measurement framework? So again, we're going to start with the why. Why are you doing whatever you're doing? What is the business outcome that you want to impact? Are you looking at acquisition or growth, quality, retention? Are you trying to create content? Are you looking for your customers to help deflect support costs? So starting with the why, starting with the what it is that you're trying to impact. So make a list of all the things that you've ever heard anybody in your company talk about. And this is what I do. I go out and interview different department stakeholders, talk to them about what their business challenges are, what their business goals are, what metrics they're held accountable for. So you have this list of all the business goals or the business outcomes that you're trying to impact. And then you make another list. And this list is about all the actions that members can take that support these business outcomes. And so for every category you have, from every stakeholder you've talked to, you should have different outcomes, and think an ideal outcome world. Whatever is possible, don't censor yourself. Make a list of all the actions that your community members could take that would support your business goals. And for us, it looks like this. We know that an engaged community can support a variety of outcomes. We know that when our hosts and guests are engaged, they're talking about hosting and traveling to their friends. They're coming together and superhost or educating new hosts. They're forming a local support network where they're able to refer guests to one another, or they're able to share cleaning services, or they can help check in each other's guests if somebody's out of town. And so we know that all of these actions also directly affect our business goals. So these are our OKRs, or our outcomes and key results that we're looking to achieve. And we know that community is woven through everything that we do, and that if we can rally our community to help support the business, then everybody wins, because what's good for the company should also be good for the community. Back to the symbiotic relationship of the ecosystem. So once you have your business goals, and you have your actions that you want your community members to take, you're mapping out your commitment curve, and you're making sure to add in reciprocity. So people should feel that the more you're asking, the more that they're contributing, the more they're also getting out of it. And then you're designing programming that facilitates these actions. So make it easy for people to do what you want them to do. And for us, as I mentioned, we have a very heavy offline strategy. And so meetups, something as simple as events, can be used for many different purposes. So we can use it for acquisition, where we're asking people to bring friends who are thinking about hosting. We can use it for quality, where we're having super hosts talk to new hosts about how they became super hosts. Or we're having a listing expo, where we can have different centers where you can get help with different parts of your Airbnb listing. Or it can be around retention and reducing churn, where we're creating really interesting and engaging social events that you wouldn't have access to unless you were an Airbnb community member. Or you're able to learn things through our events that you already wanted to learn, but they're through the umbrella of the Airbnb community. And then our favorite part, figuring out the metrics to track these actions. So this is what starts to get complex for most people. And I have good news and I have bad news. Which would you like first? The bad news? Okay. So the bad news is that there is no single magical metric that I could give you that will solve all of your problems. I wish there were. If there were, I would bottle it up and I would give it to all of you, and our lives would be very different. But that's not the case. The good news is that your problem is not as unique as you think. So raise your hand if you are trying to figure out how to measure the success of your community. It's almost everybody, right? The good news is that you are part of one of the most passionate, educated, engaged, inspiring, innovative, creative, resourceful communities in the world, which is this room full of people, and we are all trying to solve the same challenge. The good news is that you are not alone, and we are all thinking about the same thing. And what we can do is leverage this community that we have to be able to solve that problem together. So my personal challenge to you would be to talk to people today and ask them how they measure their communities. And you should be able to glean some kind of insight into how people are thinking about things, no matter how different your companies are. That's the only way we're going to be able to all solve this together. There are a few different kinds of metrics you can think about. So there are business metrics, health metrics, metrics that are related to a specific initiative or a specific campaign or problem, and then metrics for when you're managing an online community. So business metrics. So these relate directly to the bottom line. And these will all be online later, so you guys don't have to take frantic notes. And I won't dive into each of these. Evan Hamilton gave a really wonderful talk at the last CMX about several of these, where he literally walks you through how to calculate many of these. And Megan just touched on a few of them as well. But if you think about what you can do with the power of your community, how you can get your community members to help grow the business, or to help improve quality, or to help increase conversion, or to help reduce churn, and you're able to point to the cost savings between what it takes you to do that and what your traditional methods of doing that are, then you can point to a dollar figure. You can calculate a dollar figure between what you're doing by rallying your community to support these business outcomes and what it costs to do it directly. So there are health metrics, which are obviously a little more high level, a little less specific, but talk about the broader levels of health, whether it's NPS or customer satisfaction or sense of community. And then there are metrics that are related to a specific project. So things like events that we've talked about. Even something that feels as hard to quantify as something like an offline event, you should be setting numerical goals around what you're doing. So it can be number of invitations sent because you're trying to target X number of RSVPs in order to get Y number of attendees. But what you really want to think about is what the behavioral outcome is that you're trying to achieve. So you're organizing this event and these people are coming. What is it that you want all of these people to do? Or you're gathering all of these people on your online platform. What is it that you want them to do? Think about the action that you're trying to drive and then put a metric against that. So is it that you want them to be purchasing something? Is it that you want them to tell a friend? Is it that you want them to tweak something in their profile or add more content or create content or share something out? So you should be able to track the behavioral outcomes that are coming out of whatever you're asking them to do. And then if you're managing an online community, there are different metrics you look at in terms of growth, how much it's growing, how active it is, what is the quality and the sentiment of the content. So we've talked about how we think about community at Airbnb, how we've integrated it into our business in ways that we can measure and ways that we don't necessarily measure. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we've used the framework that I just walked you through to develop a system that we call the ESS, the Engagement Scoring System. And basically, it's taken us a year to put this all together, and we're still working on it. But it's our way of looking and really creating a more holistic picture of what the engagement is across all of our different markets. And so the reason we created this is because, just like you, we wanted to be able to quantify and set engagement goals globally and for specific markets. We wanted to be able to compare Sao Paulo to San Francisco to Singapore and see what we were doing differently or where we needed to focus specific programming or change our tactics in order to increase engagement levels. And you saw that we have 15 community managers. We wanted to give them this tool so that they can figure out what to change in their programs in order to drive engagement. And so what we did is we applied the framework that I just gave you. We looked at all these different signals of engagement. We thought about all the different actions people could take that would show that they were engaged with us or engaged with the community. And so we bucketed them into 4 different categories: how active people are with the product, what the quality of their hosting is, how involved they are with the community, and what their level of influence or advocacy is. And once we did this, we assigned scores or points to each of these actions based on how complex we thought they were. So thinking back to the commitment curve, the actions that are higher up on the commitment curve receive more points. Offline advocates, you'll see this in influencer advocacy. So this is more of the intangible measurement of those really valuable community members that our community managers have relationships with, but sometimes it's hard to be able to quantify their impact. And for us, these are hosts who have organized events for us, or they have created content or created articles for us, or they are willing to mentor other hosts. So this is our way of enabling our community managers to add in a more qualitative measurement, to be able to kind of give these hosts points for these actions, and for that to be reflected in the overall scores. And so what we did is every host has a score for all the actions that they've taken. And if you add them all up across the market, then you have a market aggregate score. And in order to be able to compare a market of 50,000 hosts to a market of 5,000 hosts, we divided all the scores by the number of active hosts in their market. And so now we're comparing apples with apples. And so what it enables us to see, if you look at this chart on the left, the total scoring average, we can see what the scores are for different markets and how they compare. And on the top left, you can see where people derive the points from. So an engagement score in São Paulo. Maybe the score is what it is because a lot of people travel within Brazil, and so hosts are earning points because they've taken a lot of trips. Maybe the score in Barcelona is primarily driven because there are a high number of superhosts. And so this chart on the left where it says index from all markets, it's a little bit hard to see. But our community managers can use this as a tool to figure out where they want to tweak their programming. So if Singapore is under-indexed compared to the global average for superhosts, then we can tweak our programming and design programs to increase the number of superhosts. So we really want this to be a really actionable resource for our community managers. And you can also dive into each metric where you can compare and look at something like number of trips taken, or number of superhosts, or number of offline advocates across all of the markets. And so this is constantly evolving, as I've said, and it does require analytics resources. It's taken a long time to get to this point. And the next step for us is to really be able to tie this back to the business goals that I was looking at earlier. But so we're constantly iterating, and I wanted to show you guys this because there are so many people in this room who are thinking about how to measure your community, and so many of us are really continuing to drive this conversation forward and finding creative and different ways to be able to quantify things. And I think the way that we all succeed together is by sharing all of this information and continuing this conversation. So your job is to build an engaged community, and it is your job to figure out how to harness that engagement to drive whatever outcomes are important to your ecosystem. Thank you.